All right, so I am officially opening the subcommittee on House Bill 1466. Yes,
After the hearing, there were two things that were clear we needed help with. The first was how fiscal works and how would it work with it. And I asked Representative Weiler to give us some information. And I also spoke with the Department of Safety to see why they thought they needed 5 full-time employees for this sort of thing. And they said they would send somebody. So Representative Weiler, you were from the Department of Safety. Yep.
Rob Buxton, the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
Excellent. All right.
We're good buddies.
So your choice, which you want to hear from first, but I think we need the information.
well, if Representative Weiler wouldn't mind.
Oh, I will.
Well, all right, Representative Weiler is going to talk about the fiscal committee aspect.
So the purpose of the fiscal committee is the Constitution, excuse me, requires that the legislature appropriates money. Otherwise, you can't spend it. So we serve as a part of that process by having 5 members of the House Finance Committee, 5 members of sometimes it's the Senate Finance Committee. Usually the President of the Senate wants to get in there whether he's on that committee or not. But anyway, so we serve that purpose. We meet once a month. The majority of what we deal with, we have 20 or 30 requests typically each month, plus we look at some audits. Because the fiscal committee, by law, appoints the legislative budget assistant. The legislative budget assistant has about 8 that work in the budget division and about 30 that work in the audit division. And they do performance audits as well as finance audits. So we usually have some audit reports at the end of the thing, but most of our requests come from grants that have come through the federal government to various agencies. Well, the various agencies can't spend that grant until it is appropriated. So we serve that purpose by looking at those grants, and then quite often they don't use it up in the time they've allotted. So we have a lot to extend the grant deadline. And we have them according to how much money there was and how it was established. We split the thing up into several categories according to what the law is, and whether it's from non-government sources or whether it's from federal sources and so on. And we go through all those requests and look them over and see, what the request is. At one point, I found the ire of the governor and Big Pharma by saying, I don't think we should accept this $22 million to hire 15 more people and give them vans and send them out going door to door to insist you take the COVID shot. When I was hearing all these adverse reactions, I think we would be liable for damages if we were forcing it on people. And then there were, anyway, that's an aside. But that was one thing I turned down and made quite a tussle. But so when Representative Aaron and I spoke about this money, I said, let them come to fiscal, but it has to be a request through one of the agencies to come to fiscal saying, we'd like to accept this grant and dispense it here. We've also had rearrangements. Somebody's got more money in one part of their budget than they needed in that budget, but they needed it in another part. So again, they have to come to us because we have set that in a law of how that appropriation should be spent. So if you had more money for equipment than you needed, but you didn't have enough for subcontractors, so you wanted to change money from here to here, then you have to come to us again for permission. So those are just kind of procedures that ensure that the appropriating process was followed, that in fact, the legislature and the guise of the fiscal committee has approved this. So that's quite a bit of things that come to us every month. And
Go ahead. So are you aware that there is, as Representative Aaron has talked about, like an emergency or disaster fund that fiscal can
yes,
access? All right. And do you think that the law can be changed so that the requesting entity could be from a town?
yes, it would seem that that would be the first place you'd see it. And as you know, we've had several things that came down from FEMA, usually 2 years later. And you try to make up for all the money. Well, initially you exhausted all the resources of the local government trying to stop the flood or fix the road or whatever. And then it takes a while to get through his agency, and then they report to the feds, and then the FEMA money comes. But we're forever seeing things 2 years later that we're finally giving millions of dollars to fix things. A lot of it's going to our own DOT, and much of it's going to the town DOT.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, a town could ask fiscal directly to allocate money from the state emergency management fund, not federal, state.
We don't have that authority yet. We have.
Okay, if we were to say that the town asks fiscal for the money, you would be able to say, yes, we can allocate money from
If
this
the law changes.
dedicated fund.
If the law changes. Right now,
All right, so we don't really need to involve any agency. We just say the town, Ackworth as an example, says we need $100,000 right now to fix this one road that got flooded out again, and put it on the agenda. And fiscal would say, yes, there's 100,000 in our state emergency management fund. Here's your grant. So that could do it.
I think the state emergency fund is less than $1 million. It might not be enough to fix some of the problems that come, but the larger things would take federal grants, because as Representative Aaron and I have discussed, this town is too small to have much of a budget to be fixing monthly $1 million damages. So those would take longer. But the way I read that emergency management fund, you would think that would enable them to come directly to the fiscal, but it has not happened in my 12 years there on that committee.
Well, what we were hearing from Representative Aaron is that they were looking for immediate help to, for example, get the main road coming into town operable.
Yep.
So that probably wouldn't take, I hope, $1 million. But
The way it's been done in the past, you go borrow the money, especially if the local bank is concerned, because they want the people coming
Right.
into town. You could go to the local bank, you could make a loan, you could get the money to hire the contractors and so on to fix it. Then you're going to put in a report. You keep track of every penny that you spent to do this, and you have all these good records that you can say, yes, so many man hours, so many contractors, and so on. And then you would go to that emergency
right.
fund.
This is the reason this bill is to say we don't want to follow the normal procedure. We want to get some cash out immediately, so that, or within a month at the regular fiscal meeting, so that the town can fix their main road or whatever, as a grant from the state emergency management fund, and not involve the feds at all. Right.
So
Is that right? But that's the intent of what you're looking for?
Yes, and the problem with the loan process, be they get a loan from the state or a loan from Mascoma Bank, is that when a town goes out to get a loan, they first have to have a special town meeting to get approval
more delays.
from the voters.
Yep.
And a special town meeting process could take up to 3 months, because you have to hire
Yeah.
a bond attorney, you have to notice the meeting, you have to get it approved by DRA. There's a whole process for setting up a special town meeting. That's the problem with the loan process, and that's why we're seeking to have grant money accessible within a week, a month, as soon as possible for the town to use so that they have funds to address immediate concerns.
All these things are slowed up by the assessment. How much do you need and when is it going to be spent?
Okay.
And that can take excessive
Right,
time.
but what I want to know is I understand the state emergency fund has something like $45,000 in it. Would a check within a month for $40,000 get Ackworth able to get going on their requests for more detailed assessments and all that?
Would be helpful, certainly.
They would have to
immediate-
exhaust their present resources and keep very careful track of what they spent.
Yeah.
I
And
can assume the town can keep track of their
Yeah.
expenditures.
And-
But I mean, that's the sort of thing that I got the impression was really needed. You don't want to have the state come in with a $10 million grant to fix your road, because that's going to take as long as FEMA.
Right, exactly.
What you want is a little bit up front so you can hire
Yeah.
people to do the assessments, put up a temporary bridge or reroute some road, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and the thing is that you don't want to have this fund $1 million worth of work or $2 million worth of work, because whatever work a grant would fund from the state would then be ineligible for any kind of reimbursement from FEMA coming back.
So that's what I'm saying. Should we
Yeah.
redo this so that the maximum amount is 50,000, say? But it comes out quickly.
Yeah,
I mean, would that help? Because I gathered the impression that the process of really figuring out exactly what you need is fairly lengthy.
yeah, I even say closer to 100,000 rather than 50,000.
Well-
we could.
50,000 doesn't go far
It
these
doesn't go
days.
very far when
That's
you're
true.
doing, trying to fix extensive damage, or at least.
Well,
make
no, I
things
think it's
passable.
more a matter of, fix your main road temporarily and then start
Right.
dealing with the application process and the loan process and the grant
Yeah.
process.
All the other funding,
Because that's what I'm leaning towards saying we should do, is just say, ask for a modest amount of
Right.
money, get it relatively quickly, and then proceed with the normal process.
Is there currently a procedure for, I don't know, I would guess fiscal, to mandate putting perhaps $1 million into that fund?
That could be a request again from emergency management. If they come in and he says, the amounts are so minor that you can barely fix one little pothole.
Well, and I'm thinking because obviously sometimes when these natural disasters happen, it can involve 2 or 3 small towns. And so that's what I'm thinking. If you've got 3 towns saying we need 40,000,
Yeah.
boom, you're over the 45 quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, right, well, we'd have to allocate money to fill the fund.
yeah.
Yeah, we've done a bit of backfilling where people said, here's how much we had to spend at DOT. We spent all this extra money. We've overspent this part of our budget over this unfortunate problem. Now we need to have more money put into our budget from somewhere else. That would be the kind of thing we'd get from like the DOT. So if they can get involved, especially if it's a state road, then, they have an easier process because they have more depth of funds to draw on.
Okay?
So,
Is that all that?
Yeah, I think the important things is that fiscal can move money from anywhere to anywhere else,
pretty much.
and that the town, assuming we added it into statute, the town could request it directly from fiscal without requiring
Yeah,
anybody else.
if you put that in statute, then,
But, I mean, obviously, with DOT and emergency management coming in support. If
yeah,
they,
because they have a little more depth of funds they can draw on. Whereas this, if it's 50,000 and it hardly starts to help with the problem.
well, I'm not sure we want to displace FEMA exactly, but I don't think Ackworth can properly deal with FEMA without some cash up front.
Right.
And so that's what my thinking, which may or may not be what Representative Schuett is thinking, is that we help Ackworth apply for FEMA using state funds to, patch one road maybe.
Because FEMA's likely to come by, we'll cover 75%. And 12.5% from the town, 12.5% from the state, typical in some of the grants. So it's not automatic that they're gonna cover everything, and you're still gonna be perhaps in debt in the town for a while because of what happened. Sometimes towns have insurance that they can try and collect from, and sometimes that takes years.
Well, I personally wouldn't insure Ackworth or for floods.
But, these are all things that can be looked at, but, I thought there was a way for Judy to get it quickly through emergency management, and
We found out that we're going to talk to them next.
Yeah.
But clearly, if emergency management is there saying, yes, we believe there's been a disaster and an emergency in Ackworth, and we support helping them get through it.
yeah, and the process is far longer than it took to destroy the road.
Would the form of this coming through fiscal from this emergency fund just be termed a grant? Would that be the proper?
Yes, it would likely be
Okay,
a grant
thank
from
you.
the emergency fund.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we'll hear from the gentleman from, is it emergency management?
I have to say, his folks have been great. They've been really wonderful to work with, and
I appreciate that.
no.
Sorry, this
mean
speaker
it.
is like right, like I'm like, which side of the?
Yes.
No, look. Yep. So Rob Buxton, Director of Homeland Security Emergency Management. The question that was posed was regarding to the fiscal note that was attached to the bill. And does HSEM need additional staff to facilitate a $5 million state-run grant program? Okay. All of our employees in HSEM are covered by some form of management costs that's actually received from FEMA and other locations. So whether it's Seabrook Station for a portion of the agency or from the federal government. Under the rules of the disaster relief program from FEMA, I can't utilize those management costs to manage your fund. So we were like, okay, what is the bandwidth that they're looking to create? What is the funding mechanism that we're looking at? And we look at, right now we're managing 11 open disasters. Unfortunately, the storm rate is increasing, not decreasing, unfortunately. We had a flood event in December of this year that we're working through right now. The process for FEMA is lengthy, as both Representative Aaron and Representative Wheeler know. Like this is a long process, and it's a reimbursement program. So we have to find the middle of the road as to what the scope of you're looking to develop, and say, okay, is this going to be a continuous funded program? Is this a one-time fund? What are you looking to create? So when they said, hey, here's a new program coming on, it looks at $5 million this time. What's the growth potential going to look like? Hey, we need to stand this up with some additional staff that's funded directly from there. So that's at the end of the day, that's just kind of how that sits with us.
Well, there's, if I may,
Yes.
there's, two different approaches to it. One is to say that we would provide substitute funding for, instead of going through the FEMA process, because it will be quicker and easier for everybody and less paperwork. But that requires your operation to manage. The other thing is to say a small town can't properly deal with an emergency dealing with FEMA and the assessments and all calling a town meeting for a loan in any reasonable length of time, and we want to give them a grant so that they can get the process started, which is not exactly what Representative Aaron was thinking about, but from the testimony, I think that may be
That
useful.
makes sense, yeah.
And so that you could say, give them $50,000 or $100,000 and include it in the costs that you're applying to FEMA, because when you wake up in the morning and your main roads are gone, it's going to be a lot, but you don't know how much.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I understand.
So if that were to be the case, and you'd have a fund, I was thinking that, say, Ackworth could go to fiscal and say, I want $50,000 or $100,000 from the emergency fund. We'll keep track of how we spend it. And your department would say, it appears there was a disaster that affected Ackworth, and when we do the process, we'll be supporting it. And so you won't necessarily be administering the fund so much as saying, this is available for the towns and they can use it for their share of the, or even the state share. You don't care who gets counted for it.
We don't have to wait a month for a fiscal meeting. We've called them within a couple of days. There was something urgent.
Right. Well, if, like, say, 6 small towns in Sullivan County had a flood, they would all come and say, hey, give us a hand to get going. Because meanwhile, DOT is invading the place and looking for what happened, and the town is saying, oh my God, we're going to have to borrow a fortune again. But it'll take a while to have the town meeting.
And it's even going to take a while to get an analysis from an engineer based
Correct.
upon past. Here's the pictures. Here's what's happened.
Yeah.
Here's how much
And
washed out.
I think interestingly enough, one of the things, and I know we're talking about Ackworth, is remember the DOT is going to come in and take care of State Road, and they certainly will give a hand within a certain distance of State Road. You had a lot of damage that was outside of State Road.
Yeah.
And that was really one of the challenges with that particular community. And some of them were pretty major cross sections to be able to get around town. So between some of the programming that we've established for Public Works Mutual Aid, where other communities can come in and working with local vendors, like there's been some movement in regards to how do we leverage and expand resources to get them more support. So
Some of the problems, though, with mutual aid
yeah,
is that if you have several communities in the same area, they don't have
correct,
They can't give
absolutely.
mutual aid,
Yep,
they-
yep,
because they're
Yep,
using them.
absolutely.
So what we had in the July 2021 flood, what we weren't able to get anything from mutual aid. We were able to get things like barriers and signs and
Yep.
sandbags and that kind of thing from the DOT, the regional DOT stations.
Yeah.
And David Rodrigue was
Yep.
wonderful in helping us do that. But that also took a lot of time to coordinate and put that together. The other issues that we ran into was just the time aspect. We had DOT crews around, mostly in getting contractors, people were out working on whatever other issues. And it was difficult to even get the people to do the work. We ended up having to set up a program within our town where townspeople could register as volunteers to the town and bring their backhoes or their construction material, whatever, to help fix things. So we had volunteers coming in from our town to pitching in to opening these roads. And, if we didn't have the people helping us out, I don't know where we would be.
Oh, that's what towns do. I mean, when we had the
Yeah.
Mother's Day flood in '06, a couple of people brought their backhoes around to
Yeah.
contain the avulsion.
And then, on top of that all, you can't do any work without getting DES permits. And that whole permitting process too can be time consuming. So, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah. One last question, sir. You've been listening to this whole idea of changing the the process. You don't see any part of that as disrupting what you excuse me, what you need to do in order to help towns. Is that
No, this is another tool in the toolbox, potentially.
just wanted to be sure that we
Yeah.
covered all the
Yeah.
bases. Okay, thank
Now,
you.
can I ask a director a question?
Yeah.
So with regard to a town obtaining some grant money and being able to do some work to open up roads right away, how does that play into later reimbursement through FEMA?
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest argument I've found against doing something like this, is that if a town gets money from the state or anywhere else and does some work to open up a road temporarily, that may jeopardize the town from, or make them ineligible to get funds from FEMA to fix that road permanently.
Yeah. And that certainly is a change that FEMA is looking at right now. A lot of states have looked at their disaster relief programs because storms are coming more frequently, right? And how do they put funds aside that are going to be spent locally and then have them be recoverable, right? And that is, I don't have a FEMA policy that I can hand you and say it's going to be recoverable yet. But that is a conversation that's being had because we recognize that we all, every emergency starts locally until it isn't anymore, right? And it gets big enough that we need to give state support and then federal support, and the federal disaster relief program has been challenged because of the increase in number of storms and the length of time it takes. And what we've expressed as emergency management staff is you need to also provide opportunity that when a state does put a foot forward to put some money aside, it has to be part of the recoverable value that you're going to reimburse to the state or to the community. So we're trying to work that out as, this is fluid
And,
today.
and that doesn't need state legislation. It needs federal,
no. Yeah. And that's more policy, not even legislation. It's not a change to the Stafford Act. That would be a policy that they would
Just
put
the way it's
internally.
handled.
Yep.
So we have a situation now where we still have Cranebrook Road, which is totally destroyed and out and not even existing anymore, where we have folks in town who are willing to do the work temporarily to fill in places to make the road passable. And we've asked FEMA, can we do this temporary work and not be penalized for it later on? And they said, oh yeah, sure, it's fine. But then a month later, they changed their mind. So now we're still in the situation of still waiting to hear whether we can do this temporary work and make the road passable or not. And so here we are sitting with a road that's still not usable, gone, whatever.
FEMA is beyond our control.
Yeah, that's beyond our control. But I just wanted to give an example of
Okay.
how even a town can be so paralyzed based on what the federal guidelines have been, because we're afraid to do certain work because, oh my God, then we won't ever get reimbursed when we come to do the permanent work. It's a
Okay.
problem. Anyway,
Well, I
It's
think
still like
we've heard enough.
75% at best.
right.
Correct. It's a 75-25.
For the
Yep.
2021 flood, though, they changed it. So what now Packard is seeking to do is get that 50% share of the 10% that was
Okay.
I think we've heard enough to start looking at language and see what we need to change.
Yeah, yeah, I think I had to agree with you. We've got a couple of ways we can move, but I think we want to radically simplify the program.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Question.
I'll-
Okay, so this is gonna be your subcommittee, you're gonna make a recommendation to the full committee next week?
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
we'll work
Yeah.
out, well, if we can work out some language by the scheduled exec, we will have it. If we can't, we might decide interim study,
Interim study.
because
Well, but
simplifying
I'm-
something
Okay,
like this is
Yeah.
probably.
I'm thinking also, though, if we endorse the policy and send it on to finance, because they're
There's
the
that
ones that
too.
have
Yeah,
to
it has to- it
work
has to
out
go to
that
finance.
mechanism.
That's why it's an early bill, it's going to finance. Yeah.
Because, like Representative Aaron, I represent Croydon, it was
Yeah.
devastated. And I think there were a few other communities that were not as bad, but our towns in Sullivan County really need help. So whatever
Yeah.
you could do to help.
And we seem to be having 5-year floods now instead of 100-year floods.
Unfortunately, the weather patterns and it's
Yeah,
affecting our infrastructure. I think we
Yeah.
gotta do something.
Okay,
Thank you.
but I think revisioning it from disaster relief to a helping hand to deal with disaster
Yeah.
relief would make the whole process a lot simpler.
Right, because I think the federal is fine, but it takes a while.
Right.
It's just the town's gotta deal with these, whether it's Ackworth, Croydon, or some of the other.
Right. You know, a grant to get through the first month or so.
Right, yeah.
outside of this committee for his committee of public works. I also have a bill that seeks a town to be able to apply for hazard mitigation grants.
Those, that's entirely separate. This is after a disaster.
So there are two different bills, and I don't know what my committee's gonna do with that bill, but we're considering it.
Thank you very much.
I don't know, I formally meet, I've heard a lot about it. Good thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so
We'll see you soon.
see you soon, okay. Do you know, and otherwise, I know, I don't know, I could probably reach out to Representative Dana, does Croydon have a hazard mitigation plan? You don't know, so I'll just ask her, she could.
Thank you.
I got a question.
No, thank you.
Attorney General sends me a note. You were the author of this thing that screwed up the pharmacy punishment if somebody did something wrong in pharmacy. And they said, you're the author of the point budgeting. It's probably an HB two.
Yes,
You dealt with HB two.
Yes.